From Hollywood, the dating capital of the world, it's The Dating Game. Here's the star of our show, your host, Jim Lyons.
Hey! Thank you.
It's 1978. A woman sits in front of a live studio audience, waiting for her chance at love. She has no idea the man she's about to choose isn't just another bachelor.
Bachelor number 2? It's a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the darkroom at the early age of 13. Fully developed, say hello to Rodney Alcala!
Before he became one of America's most terrifying serial killers, before the mugshots, before the trials, before he smirked his way onto national television, Rodney James Alcala was just a kid. Growing up in Texas and California, Alcala had some people questioning what he was truly capable of. Even then, people knew something wasn't right. Born in 1943, he spent his early years in San Antonio, Texas. But life took a sharp turn when his father abandoned the family. His mother packed up their lives and moved them to Los Angeles, California. That's where things started to change. People who knew him back then say there was something off. He was quiet, kept to himself, smart, but detached. And then, at just 17, he made a decision that would change everything. In 1961, Alcala enlisted in the United States Army, but just 3 years later, something happened. Something so disturbing, so severe, the Army had no choice but to discharge him. The official reason? Antisocial personality disorder. But here's what they didn't know. He had already begun to stalk women. Rodney Alcala enrolled at UCLA, studying fine arts, but he wasn't there to learn. That same year, an 8-year-old girl was walking to school when she vanished.
Her name was Tilly Shapiro. She had never made it to school that day. Instead, she was lured into Alcala's car, and what happened next would have been her last moments, if not for one witness.
This 8-year-old girl by the name of Tilly Shapiro is walking to school on Sunset Boulevard one morning, and the suspect pulls up in a car, stops her, and says, "I want to show you some photographs." And the little girl says, "I don't talk to strangers." Says, "It's okay, I know your parents."
We got a tip. A witness saw a girl being pulled into an apartment.
Yes? I need to report something. I saw a man. I think it's him. The guy from the news? Rodney Alcala? I swear it's him. He's in the park near the playground. He's got a camera, talking to some girl. Jesus, she looks so young. Please, you have to send someone. He's smiling, but something's not right. You can feel it, you know. Please hurry.
When we raided his storage locker, we found hundreds of photographs, women, children, some we've never identified.
Alcala had already fled, and for years, he would stay one step ahead. In the late 1970s, LA was a wild place. Disco clubs, palm-lined boulevards, and predators hiding in plain sight. Rodney Alcala had a trick. He'd pose as a photographer, luring women into modeling shoots. But these weren't just photo shoots. They were his hunting grounds. One by one, they vanished. Some were found in ravines, their bodies brutalized. Others were never found at all.
Something about him felt off. The way he looked at me. Like I wasn't a person, just prey. He told me I was beautiful, that I should be a model. I remember laughing, thinking, wow, someone actually thinks that. He had a camera, and he seemed so professional. But then something changed. His face, his voice, he went cold. I never saw the camera flash. I just remember running. My heart was pounding so hard. I thought it would burst out of my chest. I didn't stop, I didn't look back, and somehow I made it. But others weren't so lucky.
A vibrant 1970s television game show, The Dating Game. The stage is split into two sections. On the left, a young bachelorette sits on a high chair, separated by a colorful partition from 3 male contestants seated on identical stools. The backdrop is adorned with bold, swirling, retro floral pattern in bright orange, yellow, pink, and blue. The floor is a glossy checkerboard pattern reflecting the studio's lights. A large, illuminated The Dating Game logo is positioned prominently above the stage, with playful bubble letter typography.
Say hello to Cheryl, please. We're going to have a great time together, Cheryl. Okay, and here we go.
Bachelor number 1,
Yes.
what's your best time?
The best time is at nighttime,
Why do you say that?
because that's the only time there is.
The only time? What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but nighttime's when it really gets good.
In 1978, Alcala landed on national television. To the audience, he was charming. But the woman who picked him, Cheryl Bradshaw, she got an uneasy feeling and canceled the date. That choice may have saved her life.
This is your date, and I want to tell you something about him, Cheryl. He's a skydiver, so he's got a lot of nerve. He's into motorcycling. He's also a fine photographer. Say hello to Rodney Alcala. Rodney, come on and say hello.
I remember walking onto that stage, feeling excited. Nervous, but excited. It was supposed to be fun, a silly little game. And then I heard his voice. There was something about it, about him. He had this confidence, this arrogance, like he knew something we didn't. The way he answered my questions, too smooth, too rehearsed. It wasn't charming. It was unsettling. And when the camera stopped rolling, he came up to me, looked me right in the eyes, and he said, "We're gonna have a lot of fun together." And I swear to God, my stomach just dropped. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get away. I told the producers I changed my mind. I wasn't going on that date. Best decision I ever made.
I've seen a lot in my years on the force, but this was different. We thought we were looking at a standard homicide case. Tragic, brutal, but not unusual. Then we raided his storage locker. There were hundreds of photographs. Women, children, teenagers. Some were smiling. Some looked scared. Some were never identified. We realized then that this wasn't just a killer. This was a predator who had been hunting for years right under our noses. And that game show, that was just another hunting ground for him. He was playing a game, but we weren't laughing anymore. The so-called dating game killer will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. Today, families of the victims gathered in the courtrooms as the final verdict was read. Though justice has been served, many questions remain. How many victims were there? How many families will never know what happened to their loved ones? And how did this man, this predator, manage to elude justice for so long?
When Alcala was finally caught, police discovered evidence that linked him to multiple murders. But here's the part that'll send chills down your spine. While out on bail for one attack, he went on the dating game.
We couldn't believe it. We had a serial killer hiding in plain sight, playing for laughs on national TV.
I barely got away. I don't know how, but I did. Others weren't so lucky. I think about them all the time. I wonder if they ran, if they screamed, if they had the same moment of realization that I did. That this wasn't some guy with a camera. He wasn't who he pretended to be. And by the time they knew it, it was too late.
Tonight, a case that has shocked the nation. Rodney Alcala, the so-called dating game killer, has been sentenced for a string of brutal murders spanning decades. Authorities now believe he may be responsible for many more victims, some of whom remain unidentified. His disturbing past, his eerie appearance on national television, and the sheer horror of his crime have left a gruesome mark on the country. The families of the victims are left with a painful truth. Justice may be served, but closure is much harder to find. Rodney James Alcala, you have been found guilty of the murders of multiple victims, each one an innocent life stolen. You've shown no remorse, no regret, only arrogance and deceit. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and the pain you've caused is immeasurable. It is the judgment of this court that you've been sentenced to death. May the families of your victims find some measure of peace, knowing justice has been served.
In a move that may have sealed his fate, Alcala acted as his own lawyer during the trial. He questioned witnesses, even played a song he wrote. The jury, they weren't buying it.
The so-called dating game killer will now spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Rodney Alcala was convicted of at least 8 murders, but investigators believe there were more, maybe dozens more. Even after his death in 2021, some victims remain unidentified.